This video contains spoilers for episode 9, season 2 of Fionna and Cake. You have been warned. We pick up where we left off in the previous episode, inside of Fiona's mind. This is basically her subconscious that is filled with things that remind her of all of the guilt that she has across all the seasons and all the episodes. One of the first and most important things is the way she appears in her subconscious and the actual shape of her head inside of this subconscious space. First, she appears as Fionna in the magical world, even though her world is now non-magical. And the shape of her head also has the bunny ears, meaning it's supposed to represent how Fionna was in the magical world. This is important because now, once the world is non-magical and after she saved her universe, in her mind, she is still this magical hero. But in the real world, she technically isn't. We can also tell that she's not comfortable being either. She obviously hates her current situation inside of her universe, but she also refuses to look at her magical self when she turns the mirror around. Not only that, but the objects on the shelf also remind her of all that guilt. The plant inside of the water glass, either representing letting down Huntress Wizard or the fact that she can't keep any of her plants alive. The dead, naked chicken, obviously representing what happened in season 1 in the Winter King episode after she killed him and then melted his entire universe. Marshall Lee's demo tape after what happened and how she handled him not wanting to perform at the fundraiser anymore because she was super selfish after that and only cared about herself. The hair clip representing what happened to Fennel in the previous episode. Gary's gingerbread guy, representing that it was her fault in the first place that the sweet spot got taken over because she was the one who recommended Gary to set up the sweet spot there, and then also not being able to save it. And finally, Marshall Lee's van after what just happened in the previous episode, her ruining the sweet spot and knocking it over. Also, notice what she does with those items. She tries to shove them away once again. She still refuses to confront all of her problems even inside of her own subconscious. And we get a very brief background of what Huntress Wizard's subconscious looks like. The only thing that we can make out is it appears to be inside of her tree home, along with some banana guard tools and Finn's scarlet sword. Now, Fionna isn't the only one facing problems in her subconscious in this episode. As we see, Fionna puts her hands on Huntress Wizard's head and transports into Huntress Wizard's subconscious. And the very first thing that we see is her childhood home burning down. Now, this is where we start to see some pretty eerie similarities between Fionna and Huntress Wizard. Up until this point, it was pretty obvious that Fionna had some insane guilt built up about what she had done throughout season 1, leaving almost every universe worse off. She feels guilty. Now, Huntress Wizard throughout this season, it wasn't so obvious, but we get a peek into her mind that shows us otherwise. We can see a young Huntress Wizard pounding at the door, but this door is actually the same universe shape that we see her in back in episode 2. This obviously represents Ooh because she cries out that she can't save Finn. She feels guilty. All of a sudden, their situations are starting to sound familiar. Fionna felt guilty because she wasn't able to save the sweet spot for Gary. But this is also where we start to see the differences in their story. While Fionna still refuses to confront all of this, Huntress Wizard is different because the door actually to Ooh unlocks and out comes the Heart of the Forest. If you remember, Huntress Wizard technically did kill the Heart of the Forest. Yet another thing to feel guilty about. But instead of pushing it all the way and choosing to forget about it, she comes face to face with the Heart of the Forest and has the opportunity again to kill it. But she doesn't. She is confronting all of her guilt here. And that's what ends up working for her. She gets her green wizard magic powers back. And all she had to do was confront all of her guilt instead of pushing it back down. This is what opens up the Heart of the Forest and leads her back into that mysterious universe space that we saw in episode 2. Fionna, having nothing to lose, decides to join her. And as we cut back to Fiona's universe, this was in fact the key to opening the Heart of the Forest in Fiona's world. But before we see what actually happens, we cut to the title card of this episode, The Worm and His Orchard. This is the first episode so far in season 2 that was written and storyboarded by Rebecca Sugar, which means you know it will be a juicy episode. Okay, but now we are inside of the Heart of the Forest, and we see these red orbs again. We first saw these in episode 2, and I honestly had no idea what they were, but as we will find out later, we will find out what they are. However, another interesting thing to note that I did not mention before is that we've actually seen these red orbs all the way back in episode 1. They're actually present in the intro sequence of Fionna and Cake season 2, which is pretty interesting. Huntress Wizard is floating in this universe, but Fionna all of a sudden starts to become really heavy and fall down, which makes a lot of sense when you understand what the red orbs are. The red orbs represent the painful thoughts that people across the multiverse experience and push down, basically trying to forget about them. And as we know from Fionna, pretty much her entire life and all of her thoughts, she is trying to repress and push down. That's why it makes sense that once she is inside of this universe, she becomes really heavy and starts most of all. Where are these red orbs falling to? Well, we get the answer to that, and they are falling to a location called the undergrowth. And there is a cosmic deity who is responsible for the undergrowth, and we learned that his name is the karmic worm. This is where we learn the reference to the title of the episode, the worm and his orchard. This is the worm, and all of these painful thoughts that are on the trees is his orchard. He explains more in depth about what the red orbs are. It is his cosmic job to process the pain that people across the multiverse push down. After eating the red orbs, he pushes them out, he processes it so that they can regrow on these trees. It's basically his job to reframe anybody's guilt into a new mindset so that they can better handle it. And when said person is ready to handle their grief again, it is sent back up. The fact that he mentions that they get sent back up is a very important detail that I want you to remember for later on in this episode. Fionna does end up down here, however, and lands in a Venus flytrap, but she doesn't die yet. She gets saved by none other than Fern. Yeah, you heard me right, Fern from Ooh. We know this because when he explains to Fionna, he remembers dying in Ooh, but somehow his consciousness ended up here. And where he takes Fionna is actually really cool and very special. It looks like Fern has set up camp next to one of these red orb trees, and it appears that it is his job to handle these red orbs, as we see him throwing this purple dust on. But who does this red orb tree belong to? None other than Finn, the human, which is a direct parallel to what happened in the finale. It was Finn's job to plant Fern at the treehouse and take care of Fern's tree. And now Fern is doing the same thing for Finn in the undergrowth, which might explain why we see the Fern tree so tall 1,000 years in the future. It may be that Finn took really good care of that tree. So this is Fern's way of repaying the favor. Now, this is where the part that these red orbs will eventually float up comes back into play. Fern mentions that none of Finn's red orbs have resurfaced, meaning that Finn is not ready to deal with any of these. And the biggest red orb that we see on this tree is what appears to be Finn directly experiencing Jake's death. Of course, the Adventure Time crew leave it a tiny bit ambiguous because, as we see, Finn has the Jake tattoo while he's experiencing this, meaning the tattoo was not a memorial tattoo. He must have just genuinely wanted to get it. But screaming Jake like that and seeming very distraught and it being the biggest red orb on the tree almost confirms that Jake has died. The entire time while this is going down, Huntress Wizard realizes that the Heart of the Forest universe is mutated for some reason. The person who has mutated the Heart of the Forest is none other than the Witch Wizard, which, if you didn't know, was supposed to be the sole protector of the Heart of the Forest, and she is the very one who ends up mutating it, meaning she jumped into the portal after Huntress Wizard got exploded into it back in episode 2. It also shows that the very thing Huntress Wizard has been after this entire season is gone. The cure for Finn has been emptied by the Witch Wizard. Now, a normal citizen of Ooh is not able to handle this much power from the Heart of the Forest, which is very similar and makes sense based off what we see in the episode Wizard City from the Distant Lands miniseries. People who try to take over Kokon Tepe's power become insanely mutated and just cannot handle it. As we can see, the Witch Wizard is already part mutated, but as we'll see later in this episode, it gets even worse. Back to Fionna though, and she's in another red orb tree going through some pretty painful memories. This is where it gets a little odd because up until this point, my understanding was that every single person had their own red orb tree. But as she touches these red orbs, it's the pushed down memories of a ton of different people, all of whom are her friends, until she gets to the last one, which is a memory of her younger self. And it turns out she was an orphan as a kid, which of course makes sense because Finn was an orphan as well, left by his dad to float out into the ocean, eventually landing in Ooh. But the parallel between Finn's eventual parents, that being Joshua and Margaret, and Fiona's parents, who we don't see, are the cats that she's playing with. As we know, Finn had a mother, Margaret, a father, Joshua, a brother, Jake, and technically a brother, Jermaine. And the opposites of dogs are cats, obviously Cake the cat, but these three cats being here is a reference to how Finn got adopted by Joshua and Margaret. And these cats are basically her family. Again, we get another confirmation that Fionna feels like she ruins everyone around her by her directly saying that and feeling an insane amount of guilt for everything that she has done. During yet another insane fight sequence that we see with Huntress Wizard and the Witch Wizard, we can see that this is exactly what happens when you try to harness the power of a cosmic entity. Your body simply cannot handle it, and you start to mutate into something unrecognizable. And that's exactly what happens to the Witch Wizard here. Then we get some more information about who the karmic worm actually is, along with how Cake has been feeling this entire season. Let's start with Cake. As you all know, throughout season 2, Cake has had this subplot story with Mcron, and for whatever reason, all of their encounters have ended somewhat awkward, and we finally get an explanation for that. You see, Cake is one of the only magical beings inside of Fionna's non-magical magical world. And she reveals that she feels like a freak. This is kind of a parallel to how Simon felt after losing his magical powers in Ooh. He felt like a freak because everyone around him was magical, but he wasn't anymore. And now Cake feels the same way, but flip. That's why all of her and Mcron's encounters have been a little awkward, because Cake never really felt it. Every single time that she hung out with Mcron, she had to change her appearance into something that appeared quote-unquote normal. And that just didn't sit right with Cake, which eventually leads to the karmic worm and Cake's relationship blossoming into something pretty beautiful, as we see throughout this amazing song with the karmic worm and Cake. During this song, we see Cake transform into something that we've seen before, something that Jake has transformed into back in the episode of The New Frontier. That was the episode where Jake first experienced his croak dream. Fionna and Cake end up reuniting back at the karmic worm's place, and it's revealed who the karmic worm actually is. The karmic worm is the cosmic owl's brother. You know, that brother who got cast down after the prank that they both pulled together. It turns out this is where he ended up, and it also makes sense why he lives inside of a huge pizza box. It's because that's one of the things that they both enjoyed together back when they were brothers. But we all know the cosmic owl's fate, so Cake unfortunately has to break the news to him. And this is probably the one biggest problem that I have with Fionna and Cake season 2 so far. It turns out they can bring the cosmic owl back from the dead, and the way they do it seems pretty rushed and not very put together. So as we all know, the red orbs are thoughts that are pushed down by people in the multiverse, and it looks like the blue orbs are similar, but maybe only cosmic entities. And it turns out that he can just break open this orb and bring the cosmic owl back to life. The karmic worm tries to explain this by saying that cosmic entities never really die and that they're an idea, but we've seen cosmic entities die before, and this doesn't really make any sense. If I'm missing something about this, please let me know. Nonetheless, their relationship is still pretty beautiful as they are finally brothers reunited. But all of a sudden, we find out what happened to Finn in the previous episode, and sure enough, he got absorbed by Orbo and is sent to the Judgment Room to face trials for killing the cosmic owl. But after what just happened, we know the cosmic owl isn't dead anymore, which is exactly what happens. He pops out in a new form from his lifeless body. Anyway, he ends up clearing Finn's name of any wrongdoing, stating that he was shanked on purpose, but doesn't tell Orbo who did it. Because if you remember, the scarab actually didn't witness the murder, only the disposal of the body. And speaking of the scarab, during this entire thing, he just dips. If you remember, he was given his crystal back in order to prove the cosmic owl's bloods were on Fionna and Huntress Wizard's hands, and while all of this commotion is going down, he decides this is his best chance to get out of there. So now it seems the scarab is back as a villain in season 2, and it sets things up very interestingly for what will happen in the finale. Back with the karmic worm though, he talks about how his brother's reunion was perfect, talking about guilt, finally letting it go and setting things right. And while he's talking about this obviously strikes a nerve with Fionna. But instead of breaking down, she states that it's not too late, which means this could be the turning point for Fionna. But in her current state of mind, it might look like some sacrificing of herself could be at play here, which again sets things up very juicily for the finale and what Fiona's actions will do. But on a positive note for Fionna, finally, it seems like this very well could be the turning point for her. Based off of her dream from episode 1, we know that she feels like she severed the relationships of all of her friends. Obviously, her and Cake will always be close. It's the same Finn and Jake dynamic, but Huntress Wizard directly tells her that she isn't the broken tool. And based off of her reaction, this is finally confirmation for her that she can do right by her friends. Huntress Wizard directly acknowledges to Fionna that she isn't the problem, and hearing this from an external source finally validates that maybe not all of her friendships have been severed, and that maybe, just maybe, they can be recovered. I mean, her facial expression says it alone. So Fionna heads back to her universe. And now it's Huntress Wizard's turn to do the same thing, to return back to Ooh. But before we see her do that, we cut back to Ooh. As we know, Finn has been returned to his basically deathbed at this point, and based on his appearance, things are not looking good. I mentioned this back when he first started to deteriorate after the demonic wishing eye wish failed. It appeared as if he was getting older, or at least in his appearance. And when he gets returned here, he looks eerily similar to the way we see his old body in the episode Together Again. And in Together Again, we know that's when he died. Of course, seeing an old man Finn dead in Together Again would make you assume that he died of old age, but because of the poisoning, he is deteriorating by the second, and the way he looks here is eerily similar to the old man Finn that we see in the Dead Worlds. Does this mean that Finn will actually end up dying? I guess the finale will answer that question, but I just don't think they can kill off Finn like like that. But at the same time, his appearance being eerily similar to his old man version has to be on purpose, even down to his buffness. We see his old man version isn't very buff, and as he's deteriorating, he does not look buff on his deathbed right now. It's not looking good. Now, based off of past experiences, aka the last episode, we know that when PB is faced with a person who is dying or thing that is dying, her go-to choice is to put it out of its misery. And after she says that she has no choice, we hear a cockback of a gun, like she's gonna put Finn out of his misery. But it turns out it's just her phone, and that they're gonna call Minerva. Now, why exactly would they call Minerva, who is Finn's mom, by the way? Because Finn's mom actually isn't human right now. When she was slowly dying, she uploaded her consciousness into a computer and spread her consciousness throughout Minerva bots around the entirety of the island. When Finn comes face to face with her on the computer screen, she still is Minerva. It's just that her subconscious is uploaded to a computer. And it seems like Finn's body, Finn's physical form, is beyond saving at this point, which is why PB thinks she has to resort to upload his consciousness to a computer to keep him somewhat alive. Of course, this isn't confirmed. We will only find out in the finale. But another reason is that maybe PB thinks Finn's mom can actually cure him. We know that Minerva was a doctor and that she knows her son better than anyone else, so maybe she could cure Finn. Again, we won't know until the finale, but it's getting heated up. And of course, Huntress Wizard wants to help out Finn back in Ooo. And when she goes to travel back to Ooo through that star-looking thing, it cracks up and dissolves. She is not able to go back to Ooo, which I think is because the heart of the forest in Ooo is dead. Based on the previous episode, PB put it out of its misery. There is no more portal for her to travel back to. How is Huntress Wizard going to get back to Ooo? Are we gonna see another sacrificing plotline back in season 1 by maybe Huntress Wizard somehow becoming the heart of the forest of Ooo itself? At this point, it seems like she would probably do anything to save Finn, so who knows? That could be the case. But like I said, we don't know. Now, this is the first time into the end credits that we do not see Fionna watering this flower. This flower is already fully bloomed and blossoming, which could stand for a plethora of things, but what I think it means is that this flower actually represented them finding the heart of the forest in Fionna's universe, because the flower itself is spiraling and looks very similar to how the portal to the heart of the forest opened in Fionna's universe. But then again, it's all symbolism, so it could mean totally something different, and if you have another theory, please let me know. Like I said in my previous video, we hit 100,000 subscribers, and it wouldn't be possible without all of you. I know that's a very cliche thing to say and what all YouTubers say after they hit 100,000 subscribers, but it's because it's true. Seriously though, this is just such a surreal experience, and I am just so thankful for anyone who has watched any of my videos. I'm super excited for the finale, and if you didn't know, I try and cover all of these episodes as soon as they come out and break them down as thoroughly as I can, and I'm sure the finale will have some pretty juicy details to look forward to. So don't forget to subscribe so you do not miss that video. Like I said, thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. I truly, truly appreciate it so much. But as always, stay adventurous.